Hi everyone. I think we are about to start. Great, great. So we have quite a good attendance here. So hi guys, welcome to our Elevate. Welcome to Elevate, the content marketing sessions that we are doing. And this session is going to specifically talk about edtech and the market that we are seeing, the big booming market where we see every day we see new unicorns coming and the sector getting bigger and bigger and the kind of impact that is creating for society and for people that is for everyone to see. Uh, so I'll quickly introduce our guests. Mihir is here. Mihir is co-founder and CEO for Teachment. Teachment has been kind of been in the foray for quite some time. People talking about them. Uh, they have kind of revolutionized the whole educator-based model. I see there are over 10 lakh educators kind of working with Teachment as a partner, and there are over 20 lakh classes that are kind of going on Teachment. And we keep hearing about Teachment, and we are always amazed to see their content marketing strategy and the things that they are doing. And it's a pleasure to welcome Mihir here on the platform and as a part of this panel. Hi, Mihir.
Thanks a lot, Akash. I think a lot of very kind words shared by you. Thanks a lot for the introduction.
Yes, and we have Vaibhav here. Vaibhav is founder of GrowthSchool.io. You'll also know Vaibhav as the guy on LinkedIn who's very popular and whose posts we all keep seeing. So Vaibhav has been known as a growth hacker, and he's helped a lot of startups kind of scale with the growth hack strategy. Uh, and he's been doing it from a very young age. He's started his own ethic venture called GrowthSchool.io, which is also has been in news, and they are kind of looking to create cohort-based courses, and which the top 1% of the instructors that are there in the country across the world would be kind of curating courses for all of you so that everyone gets the benefit. So basically revolutionizing the whole college-based education, which we all a lot of us talk about that it needs a lot of revolution, and Vaibhav is just about bringing that. So welcome Vaibhav to our panel.
Hey, thanks, Akash. Thanks for having me. Very excited about this one.
Great. Great. So, as you all know, the panel we'll be talking about what is content marketing, what on content marketing is happening on the tech, and we'll also ask some questions to Vaibhav and Mihir, and we'll get to know more how they are kind of approaching the whole the content marketing wave that is coming across in the tech market. So we've seen a lot of innovation that has come in the tech market, a lot of unicorns coming in. The pandemic has kind of accelerated the growth. The demand has been kind of at all-time high, and we've also seen a lot of positive life changes that it has kind of brought in. Students from all across the country, all walks of life, have been able to get the kind of quality education that we only could imagine before the whole edtech scene was prevalent in India. So it is kind of catering to a lot of multiple audiences. It is creating a lot of impact. Uh, Teachment and or everyone is kind of also creating an infrastructure for a lot of people so that they can get education by remote means. Technological development is what we are seeing. India is kind of leading from the forefront in the technological the growth that is happening in the edtech segment. And now with all of that, promoting an edtech brand also becomes a big challenge because the market is kind of full. There's a lot of players in the market, everybody creating their own model, everybody creating their own impact, but still the challenge is always there. And another thing that comes is how do you balance product expectation with the kind of content that you're kind of rolling it out. Your sales effort has to be kind of in sync with the kind of content and the kind of content strategy that you have. So with this footnote, we'll kind of start the session and ask some question to our the esteemed panel that we have. So for both of you, this is a common question. Walk us through what is happening in the current edtech landscape, especially after the pandemic, uh, and what are the kind of issues that this online segment is trying to solve, and also how accessible has it made the education to masses. We can start with Mihir.
Hey, sure, Akash. So I think broadly, see the question is quite vast in terms of what is really happening in edtech. Maybe let's talk about how edtech has kind of panned out so far in India and across the globe, and what has really changed, right? What has really changed and how things are where things are headed. So if you look at edtech as a segment, right, and very frequently I get this joke that Teachment is an edtech player, right, and it ends at that. So and the reason people joke about it that way is that if you look at edtech as a segment over the last few years or for the last decade or so, a lot of innovation has happened around content, right? Content as an offering of edtech, right? So not just in India but across the globe, the largest outcomes that have been created in these so-called edtech category has been around massive content players that have created a moat around generating enormous amount of content, and then students consuming that content across different geographies, and this becoming the core offering itself that the platforms attract audience for. And this continues to remain the case for the largest segment of edtech right now. Um, what has really started changing is how innovation is really happening in the industry, right? So if you look at creators, educators, teachers, influencers, so these are all content creators that have always been eliminated from the mainstream delivery of this content the way you see in edtech so far, right? So what has really happened over the last 1 year, especially in India, is that really teachers have started coming to the center of how education is being delivered online, and this is across segments, right? It's across K-12, test prep, upskilling, hobbies, life skills, etc. So this is a big change that we are seeing, that a lot of startups are now starting to innovate around how do we bring teachers and educators to the center of this entire experience, rather than just, let's say, an asynchronous content delivery that is happening, that has been traditionally happening in the segment, right? So that's how things are changing, and a lot of different players are innovating across very different segmentations, right? So you can segment the industry by let's say age groups. You can segment it by, let's say, curriculum that the students are following. You can segment it by let's say the style of learning, etc. But this is what has significantly changed, and Vaibhav, please feel free to add on this.
Not sure what else I could add, but I think if I break down how the space is evolving, right? One is in terms of demand, right? The reason why demand inherently went up is because it was COVID just pushed us to do that. There's no other way for you to learn, right? With that happening, the formats evolved in online education. Before this, it was predominantly, like Mir suggested, it was async, right? Recorded content, which is being viewed. But right now, the focus has gone back to the teacher, which is very important in education, because education is not just about curriculums and what people learn, but who is teaching them and how are we enabling these teachers with ease and with tools and with everything that they need to be able to do what they're best at, right? And I think a couple of other things also evolved is that access of people went up, right? So today, if I want to learn from, like, the best person in the world who teaches physics, technology can enable you to do that. And that's the best part of edtech revolution that's happening, right? You don't have to go to a Harvard to learn from a Harvard professor anymore. That was there before in a async format, but that is evolving. Now Harvard professors are saying, hey, you know what? Why don't I start my own online school, right? And teach people at scale. Why should I contain my knowledge to only 100 people in a year while I can do it to 100,000 people? And on the other note, right, where teaching or teachers predominantly have been people. If you look at the whole landscape, I will focus slightly on India right now. Teachers have been people. 90% or 95% of the schools and colleges will have teachers who are actually not doing what they teach, right? They're pretty, most of the times I mean, at least in my college, I don't come from an IIT or an IIM. We were basically, my teachers were basically passed outs of my own college who didn't get a job eventually, who ended up teaching us, right? And that awareness has started to change, right? Hence, there's alternative universities, alternative schools that are being built, and the inherent trust came in because of that 1 year gap that we got, right? And people, when they were forced to do this, they tried it, people got results, and now they inherently trust. I think it's going to be really hard to go back to the usual form of education right now. So I'm hoping for a hybrid form. But again, right, in terms of content, it again stays the same. The quality, the kind of delivery, in the end, it's all content, right? Written, text, video, live, all that are forms of content. But where is the content coming from? Who is that delivering the content? What are the tools that are enabling that? Has just blasted over the course of last 1.5 year. So yeah.
Yeah, rightly answered, Vaibhav, and he's really bringing educators, teachers in the forefront is something that is kind of already revolutionizing a lot of things. Now, my second question to you is about the whole edtech is very right now competitive, right? Specifically after post-pandemic, we see a lot of edtech players in the market, and all are competing against each other, and some are competing in different genres, right? So, what are the kind of content strategy each of you have found useful to distinguish yourself? You both are kind of offering a unique product. Teachment is enabling teachers to digitalize classroom, and growth school, whether you are upskilling people in a community-led manner. So would love you to kind of throw some light on the kind of content strategies that both of you are kind of using, and whether you can go first.
Sure. I mean, again, right, we are at a very early stage right now. In terms of content marketing plan, we have made it very simple and clear. We have kept we have pushed the user in the center. We said UGC for the win right now because hey, like what is content marketing, right? You talking about your product in an interesting way that excites people to come and hook you up or whatever it is, right? To get engaged with your product, and who's the best person to talk about it. So in everything that we do, there is a loop of UGC that is involved, and we want our students to talk about it, our customers to talk about it rather than us talking about it, and that has led to a very good organic push that we got, that we keep consistently get in form of a loop, right? Hence, it's very hard for anybody to kind of skip what we do, right? So UGC has been the number one factor that we kind of push out today. But as we speak today, right? Like I said, we just launched publicly like last month. There's so much to be done. But when it comes to content today, uh, a biggest differentiator, I mean, according to me, for any edtech startup is distribution, right? टेक बना लोगे, क्रिएटर्स को लेके आ जाओगे, लेकिन पढ़ेगा कौन, right? Sorting out the distribution is, I mean, in Mihir's case, since it's a SaaS, it could be a slightly different standpoint. But for someone like us who like a decentralized university, in our case, padega kaun tumse, right? In that case, if you just rely on paid loops, paid acquisition loops, and start compete with the market that is out there, you're gonna go to a spot where you have to keep raising money to keep your business alive, right? So fundamentally, what the way we are thinking about, or the way we are approaching this, is about creating value pockets. Value pockets could be in form of content on blogs, or ultimate guides, to PDFs, to free blog art, to free content, to like curated content on the internet, to YouTube videos, to social media. How can you leverage the organic content? How can you leverage the organic levers to drive users, and how can you also use the UGC front, right, to generate those loops so that users are coming on organically rather than you paying for them every single time. Now, if I tell you that, hey, you know what, we are at a position where at point of time we are not going to spend a rupee and we're going to get the acquisition flow going, that would be a lie. I think we are hundreds of years away from that, right? But I think for us to win this market, distribution is the key, and the distribution cannot be just paid, right? It has to be a hybrid model, and that's what we've been focusing on building. And the best part about this is it cannot be built overnight. It cannot be built with money. It can only be built with persistence and continuous effort of community. So yeah, that's how we are going about it.
Yeah, Mihir, your thoughts.
Yes, so I think Akash, it's very true that edtech is seen as a crowded space, right? So we are at a stage that edtech itself, the word itself has become cliched. Right? So if you're talking to, let's say, media, if you're talking to consumers, if you're talking to let's say any stakeholders in the ecosystem, right? As soon as you say edtech, you are fit together in a very you're seen in a very crowded space. But I think it's all about really having a very differentiated proposition. So internally thinking that what is that differentiation that you are bringing as an offering, what is that proposition. So in our case, for example, that was about being the infrastructure layer in education, right? Or so when you come with a when you really focus on a very differentiated proposition, it's then about really communicating that proposition, right? So I would break this problem down into figuring out what is that unique proposition and then communicating, right? So when it came to communication, it was things like let's say this is where we use experts like Pepper Content or the internal experts on how do you really communicate that proposition to the users. So for us is what things like for example, we never really marketed to students. So student marketing is really expensive, right? So if you are, for example, in any shape or form related to the tutoring industry, then you would be if you're running any kinds of ads, then you will be actually competing with on same keywords as 100 other players, and that will be very expensive marketing to be doing. So we have never really marketed to students at all, right? So we decided that we figured out that a teacher proposition is something that is missing, a teacher platform is something that is missing, and whatever marketing that we have done so far has been focused purely on teachers, right? If you look at the other way of marketing communication that we do, we market ourselves as an infrastructure platform, right? Again, a gap that you would not see, again keywords that you will not see cliched in the industry because that proposition itself is missing. So that's how we look at it, right? Figuring out the proposition and then really communicating it in the right way.
Got it. My next question was about talking about some paid and organic. How's that splitting up? I think Weber and Mihir, you kind of covered that in this answer itself. Next question that I have is about the students who are kind of benefiting from your platform. So what are some of the ways that kind of you are kind of measuring student performance and progress, right? What is the kind of gain that they're getting from the platform? And how can we shift the standard of how do we measure success of individual on the platforms? Mihir or whether anyone can go who wants to take this.
Yeah, well, probably you can take it. Just to kind of summarize on the teachment front, Akash. So we measure our success in terms of teacher success, right? So
Yeah,
again, like student success is a parameter that we haven't really optimized for so far. So
yeah,
for us, it's about, so our primary parameters are about making a teacher successful, and if the teacher is getting successful, then it's kind of it is because the students who are coming to their classes, joining their courses, etc., are finding value out of it, right? So for us,
yeah,
it's about figuring out what are the biggest pain points for the teachers. How can we solve those pain points and deriving all metrics out of that, right? So that's how we look
yeah.
at it as a platform, and student success becomes something that feeds into it.
Got it. Weber, according to you.
Yeah, I think uh, see, there are a couple of ways of looking at this. One is outcomes where you could define outcomes for, right? Let's say somebody is here for a job in product management, right? Like there you can pretty much define an objective saying that, hey, are you getting a job after this program or 6 months after this program? Or if you got a job, did this program help you to get that job or not? Is a direct outcome that you establish, right? That is one way of doing about it. Second way of thinking about it is a lot of people today. I mean, there are a lot of people in the in the live session as well. I would ask this question to everybody as well. How many of you are actually learning uh, to get better at what you do or upskill yourself rather than looking for a job? Guys, if you guys are any of you people are doing that, just drop a yes or a me in the comment box if there's anybody in the chat. So you will realize that while the whole world is, look at that, right? Like while the whole world is chasing jobs, there's a massive market out there which is looking to upskill, get better at what they do, or transition, or test out new careers, right? There's nobody catering to that. And that is the space that we started to cater to start with. All right. People who want to upskill, people who want to get better, people who want to transition from design to product, engineering to product, or performance or whatever that could be. And also, there are a lot of people who want to learn beyond of skills that will get them directly a job, but also things that will make them better at a job, like communication, right? Like writing, right? Or starting a parallel career, which is freelancing, right? All these factors, for every program that we create, the outcome kind of is varied, and every person who comes in the program has a different outcome that he wants to achieve, right? So we usually go by tying down an objective based on program, right? And on top of that, the easiest metric for us to look, since it is so scattered to start with, is NPS. अगर बंदे को अच्छा लगा, because here my student is actually someone who's learning, right? If a guy likes, or if a guy or a girl likes the session, and if he is able to achieve the objective that he wants to, the NPS will be predominantly high, right? Or else if you're going to rate it really bad, and your NPS is going to go for a toss. So for us, the easier metric to look at has been NPS so far, but the secondary metrics have definitely been tying down objectives based on program. So yeah.
Got it. Thanks, Raghav. So next question is for me, for you. So Teachment has kind of put a spotlight on teachers or educators' role, specifically in the post-pandemic setup. Uh, there are many student groups that really need hand-holding, and teachers, if we see, are the original content creators. If you look at it, right? So say how a platform like say Teachment has kind of changed the form of teaching, right? And how do you see it going ahead in your head? How does it change the way education is being imparted?
Yeah, the way teaching and learning is happening on our platform has been significantly different from let's say the large scale teaching and learning online, the way it has been happening so far, right? So to give you a few examples, 95% plus of all students who consume classes over Teachment consume it using mobile phones rather than their desktop, right? 75% plus teachers on the platform are teaching using their mobile phones. Almost 80% plus of these are coming from tier 2, tier 3 rural areas. So the kind of persona that you have traditionally seen in live class delivery across different edtech players over the last few years, that is very different from the kind of representation that you see on a platform like Teachment. And it's all about really creating that access to everyone across the country and across different segments and geographies to this form of teaching and learning, right? So for someone to start teaching using the platform, all they need is a smartphone, a basic smartphone where they can install the Teachment application, and within 2 minutes actually they are able to go live and start running a class. It has been made as simple as that. So if you look at the variety of use cases that are happening on the platform, right? So a lot of regionalization of how education is delivered. So in K-12 we see a lot of regionalization where you will have, let's say, a teacher in a very remote town in Chhattisgarh, maybe a population of 20,000 students, 20,000 people, and he will be teaching for Chhattisgarh board for a certain grades mathematics subject, and students will be joining from 150 kilometer radius for his very unique delivery that is happening, very unique proposition. In test prep, we are seeing pan India networks being created by teachers, where let's say a CA teacher out of Delhi is teaching 80 to 90 students from across the country because he's having an offering that many students are finding very relevant. We have seen use cases as wide as, for example, even live surgery classes happen in medical schools to the platform, various training sessions in government academies happening to the platform. So it has been about really democratizing how online teaching and learning happens, and purely through making that access of both the supply and the demand side very, very easy.
Amazing. I mean, this is the kind of impact that people and players like that are creating. It's just amazing to hear such stories. Uh, Next question to you, Weber. So you are talking about things that a lot of universities kind of miss out, the kind of key skills. So according to you, what are some of the key skills that maybe say traditional universities are kind of missing out that you from growth school is kind of looking to leverage? And any specific skills that you would kind of point out to our listeners that you think is really important to learn in this day and age to kind of succeed?
Yeah, I think when we think about, so I don't think traditional universities are missing out, but they are not optimized for that, would be a better word, right? For example, like it could be as simple as communication, right? How do you talk to each other? Like, how do you talk in a bigger group? How do you put your word out? How do you convince people? It's such a important skill today. It makes and breaks your career, right? Irrespective of how good you are, right? It's something that is not taught to you as a sequence, right? It is usually a byproduct of how active you are. So few people become very good at communication, few people just end up being whatever they are or even go down, right? The skills like this. Two, jumping down to skills which are extremely important, like how do you actually apply for a job? How do you write a cold email? How do you position yourself on the internet? Because today all these things matter, right? How do you break out of the clutter, right? Like in terms of like if you have a LinkedIn premium account, and if you're a job seeker, you would see that every decent job posting has 1,000 people applied for it, right? How the hell do you stand out? These are not taught, right? Your resume or your skills actually comes in after you get selected for the interview, right? There are a lot of these things that are not taught at all. Now, is this the job of a university to teach, to kind of teach, or is this a job of a student to kind of acquire the skills? I'm unsure about it, right? But I think there has to be someone who has to tell them that these skills are important. Internet is enabling us to kind of teach all these skills today. And also, right, what about alternative careers? This is something that I'm very, very, I find it very, very important, because I personally have got benefited a lot out of this, right? While I worked with Uber, while I was working with Klook, I always had an alternative career, which was freelancing, consulting, teaching, all these stuff, right? Like, where do you find your peace with? Because today, I mean, again, I will ask this question to the crowd. How many of you are happy with what you do, right? And how many of you are truly busy? We all have a lot of time to kind of explore things that we want to, right? And all of those things would be alternative careers. I mean, you could be someone pretty good at like guitar, right? And you can start teaching guitar, and that too on the internet, to starting freelancing and all those. Those skills are not even spoken about, right? Because of how education is done in our colleges, right? We cannot, like, there's a rule that you have to attend 75% of the classes, but nobody's ever asked, are you actually learning something from the class? If you're learning nothing from the class, why the hell should you even attend, right? It's sheer waste of time. So there are a lot of these fundamental issues that a university has, which are not, which is not being taught. Apart from going back to the very, very important factor of who is actually teaching in these universities, right? So that needs to be fixed first, I would say, if it comes to universities, before they say, okay, हम communication भी सिखाएंगे, हम cold emailing भी सिखाएंगे, उससे पहले ना, we have to fix the person who's teaching, right? Now again, right, I go back to the people right now and ask a question: who would you like to learn from? If you're given a chance, you go back to 10th and 12th, and you're jumping onto your BCom, engineering, what MBA or whatever. Who would you like to learn from? Someone who you aspire to become. Let's say you want to work at Google, you want to learn from someone who's already working at Google, or do you want to learn from a professor who has not done the job for 25 years before? A or B, right? Guys, do comment, because I would like to know as well. Because there are 180 people, man, I would love to know their thoughts as well here. But with that being said, right, that fundamental thing kind of is missing. Now I'm seeing a lot of A's coming up, right? So yeah.
Gaurav dropping some truth bombs right in the afternoon. But so next question to Mihir. Mihir, want to know your thoughts on vernacular teaching, right? With India is a country that has so many languages, people speaking so many languages. Native languages kind of differ from state to state and even cities to cities. So, what are your thoughts on vernacular teaching and also vernacular content coming out on the platform?
I think it's really at the core of how do you address the larger demand out there, right? It cannot be done without going very very deep in vernacular. So if I tell you an example, when we were very early as a platform, when we had just launched a few months down the line, we were doing some analytics on the subject names that teachers put when they create a classroom on Teachment, and we realized that there were a good few hundred classrooms which had a subject called Ganit written in the Devanagari script in Hindi as the subject, right? That's where we realized that teachers and students inherently are using vernacular. We did an entire analysis on how much vernacular script has been put on the platform, and the numbers were really really a surprise to us. So that's when we decided that the entire platform needs to support vernacular. So right now, Teachment, the entire product end to end, is available in 11 languages. 10 languages in addition to English. And even, for example, the video experience, for example, on AirMeet, we are seeing an interface right now for video. Similarly, you see an interface on Teachment when you take a live class. Even that interface is available in vernacular in these 11 languages. So it has really a big impact. Almost 25% users on the platform interact with the product in a vernacular manner. And if you actually look at analyzing the content that teachers are creating, the way they are teaching in these classes, then you realize that actually the extent of vernacular usage is much more deeper, right? So for example, when you talk to let's say a student in a tier 3 city in India, why are you taking live classes with this particular teacher from a nearby city rather than, let's say, a national teacher teaching with a big brand? They say that we are just not able to understand that content because the dialect, the style of teaching, the curriculum, etc., is just not aligned with our needs. So vernacular is a very big element. Localization, regionalization is a very big element if we really want to cater to the larger, diverse audience that is out there. India has very diverse demand, right? So almost 88% plus students in India go to state board schools rather than national CBSE, ICSE school, right? 75% plus are studying in Hindi medium or vernacular medium schools, and almost 80% plus of the demand is coming from tier 2, tier 3 rural areas. So that's why this becomes even more important.
Great, great. Yes, we totally aligned. Next question to Vaibhav. Vaibhav, you being an expert in growth marketing and growth hacking, so vernacular content marketing is also kind of growing really in importance. And where do you think that this would fit into, say, upskilling on executive training platforms, which is something like yours?
I think we have early hints of this with requests coming in from people because we are predominantly English right now, right? Again, we're on day zero, so we are predominantly English right now. But there's a lot of requests that comes out to us saying, "Hey, can we do this in Hindi? Can we do this in Telugu? Like, can the speaker, since the speaker is a South Indian guy, can he speak in Tamil also?" Right? There are these requests that have started to come in. We haven't been able to cater to those requests yet, but if you look at a lot of our sessions, right, today, a lot of these sessions are usually English, right? A little bit of Hindi, little bit of English, because that is much more widely accepted. And also, when we so we do this very interesting thing in the beginning of the session, where we ask people to, where we analyze on a map to understand where are these people coming from different parts of the world, right? So that gives the speaker or the mentor a very good perspective of where are these people coming from. आज ज़्यादा हिंदी बात करना है कि नहीं करना है, or should we stick to English, or is there a lot of people from the region that he comes from or from the dialect that he talks in, let's say Tamil or Telugu or Oriya in this case, and also add some flavor to it so that people can feel home, right? There are these little things that we do here and there to make the session super engaging. But with that being said, we have not gone full throttle on vernacular as such as of yet. But I think one startup which has done really well, though I mean I really like what they're doing, is Josh Skills, right? Of Josh Talk. Supriya was on one of the other sessions where they have literally catered to the vernacular space, right? Like where they said Hindi mein hai content unka. I think a predominantly Hindi driven content, right? Where the audience, like Mihir suggested, like 88%, 80 plus percent of the audience are not comfortable with learning in English. And if you're not opening up other languages, you're containing yourself, you're restricting yourself from reaching those people. So it has to be done, if not today, tomorrow, but it all depends on how you're going to go about it. Right. So,
Yeah, yeah, totally agree with that. So, Mihir, next question to you. So, there's so much stress on educators on the platform, right? So, what challenges you kind of foresee in acquiring more teachers? Many of them, because they're not tech savvy, even though the platform is free, the hesitance due to tech was always there, right, in a lot of specifically tier two, tier three cities. What is the kind of challenge do you see going ahead when you kind of scale further? That how will you solve this, and what is the level of challenge that you see across this?
Yeah, I think see, broadly, if we talk about till a couple of years back, if you look at the challenges, why to the larger teacher audience online teaching was not a feasible option. The biggest bottleneck was around infrastructure, right? So just having access to the right devices, access to internet, it was a challenge for majority of the teacher base that we would have, and that has significantly changed over the last few years. Right now, almost all teachers have access to some form of smartphones. They typically have access to a 4G internet connection, although the kind of quality that you get keeps on varying, but still connections that can support video delivery, that can support live class delivery, etc. So that infrastructure problem has got solved to a significant extent now. The problem that is being tackled in the industry in a massive way, and that players like us are actually doing, is how do you make technology easier for such teachers to adopt, easier for them to onboard, and easier for them to sustain on a platform like ours or different platforms that are out there, right? So that's where most of the innovation is actually happening. If you ask me personally, where the next leg of innovation will go after this, I think we are still, let's say, a few years away from giving 100% seamless experience from a technology perspective for every and each and every kind of teacher. But once that gets tackled, the next biggest challenge is really on how do you teach well in an online setup, right? And that becomes that kind of goes into more about pedagogy for online teaching. How do you make classes more interactive? How do you engage with students in a better way? How do you understand how students are perceiving? Again, a good chunk of this can be solved by technology, but it will also be about teachers adapting themselves on how do you teach in an online environment versus an offline environment. So I would say, in terms of just technology or online teaching adoption, these are the three waves in which this is happening and where innovation will happen.
Agree, agree. So what we'll do is, I think I'm done with my set of questions. So I would just, we'll just pick up 2 or 3 questions from our audience that they have kind of put in Q&A. One of them I'll pick up from Miss Lee Zehra. She asks, how do you think community-based edtech startups will do in the near future? That's a very nice question. Vaibhav, would you like to take that up?
Yeah. How do you think community-based edtech startups will do in near future? Listen, this is the only way edtech startups can survive, according to me. The only way you can replicate the experience of a college. Why do we go to college? We don't go to college. The reason why NPS of a college is so high, the reason why everybody wants to go to college, in spite of not learning or not getting the best out of it, is because of the community angle that a college has. You meet people, you get to know people, you learn with them, right? The peer-to-peer setup is something that like literally motivates you to go to a college, right? And today, most of the people decide on which college to go based on the kind of people they're going to meet. Why are IITs, IIMs bigger than any other colleges? Because of the quality of people that come there, right? More than what they are taught. I mean, Mihir, I hope you agree with this, right? So in this case, for online education to be successful, you should be able to replicate the form of education, the form of engagement, the form of peer-to-peer learning on the internet. And that can happen via online community engagement. So that is pretty much how people are going to learn. If you want to do serious learning on the internet, it has to be in cohorts and it has to be powered via community, or else you're left to yourself. And we know what happens when we're left to ourselves, right? So yeah.
No, I think
Maybe
I
would you like to? Yeah.
completely agree with Vaibhav on this front. That see, if we see how teaching is really happening on some of the classrooms over teachment, you see a lot of engagement across a lot of these classrooms where students are really happy with what they're learning and how teachers are doing it. So for example, a lot of focus that we are putting is just to replicate the offline classroom interactivity in an online classroom, right? That's a very big tech challenge to cater to, where how do you bring student discussions online? How do you bring small chat groups online? How do you bring that same form of positive competitiveness among students into an online setup as well? Because ultimately classrooms are all about cohorts, right? A similar set of people who are working towards a similar goal over a time bound period. And how do you really put it together where students get inspired by each other and are able to work towards bettering themselves?
Great, great. Last question to both of you. This is from Prateek Malhotra. Uh, so how do you see content marketing from the perspective of MQL or lead generation? In simple words, how do you use content marketing for generating leads beyond paid marketing? I'd like both of you to kind of shed some light on this.
I think very interesting question, right? Uh, Again, right? If you look at acquisition or lead generation or anything of that sort, the reason why somebody is coming and giving out his information is because they're getting something off you, right? So what you do in paid marketing is also in a way content marketing, right? Because you're putting a content out which is kind of convincing people that this is for them, right? paid marketing is a channel, right? Through which you're putting your content out there, right? So it could be the same content which is being pushed out. So I think one of the most important aspects here, which could drive very good lead generation for you, could be UGC, where your customers are talking about the product rather than you talking about it. Two is value addition. How can you give them, or add value to their lives without actually asking them to swipe their card, right? How are you able to create that impact? Little impact is all they expect for you to create before even they could, swipe their card, right? So that becomes a hardcore content game, right? It could be your ebooks, it could be your free courses, it could be your guest sessions like this that Elevate is doing. So all these aspects kind of become really, really important. And so if you're asking technically how do I achieve it, think about referral loops, think about UGC loops, think about SEO is a little long term, but think about organic loops with a mix of hybrid and paid, where like starting a YouTube channel, initially pushing it with performance, but eventually letting the content do the job and stuff like that are actually very interesting ways of going about it. Newsletters is one other interesting way of going about it. Relying on other people network, that is what Elevate is doing here, is also very powerful way of generating without actually paying for it. So yeah, I'm sorry if I went a little technical here,
No,
but yeah.
No, I would just want to underline again the importance of UGC here. I think if there is one single largest way to create virality and non-linearity into how you grow, that's really about betting on user generated content, right? How do you build that? Because see, content generation, if you do it as a platform yourself, then it becomes a linear equation, right? You keep on creating more and more content, you keep on pumping more and more money into creating content, and then that keeps on giving you a really linear outcome into your investment. But non-linearity comes when you're able to leverage your user generated content, get more users in, and that effect just keeps on multiplying, right? So if you're able to figure out a model that inherently makes use of this equation, then it can go a long way for you.
great. So guys, while we want to continue it longer, but I think we are running a bit short on time. So thanks, Weber, and thanks, Mir. This is an amazing session. A lot of learning from me also. This is more than I've learned in last whole week. I learned in the last 45 minutes. This is great. The audience has been really, really interactive, and thank the audience also for this session. So thanks a lot, folks, and signing off, and uh, really enriched after the session. Came to know a lot more on how kind of edtech, and as Mihir would say, not just edtech, the whole education market is kind of shaping up. A really interesting insights. Thanks, Mihir, and thanks, Weber, for giving us time. It was really pleasure to host both of you.
Thank you. Thanks, audience, and thanks, Akash, and thanks, Mihir, for the time.
Thanks a
Yeah,
lot everyone
thank
for
you.
joining in. Thanks Akash, thanks Abho.
Thank you.